Welcome to episode number 52 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. I am Vince, and with me, as always, is Michael Martino. Michael, ¿qué pasa?
What's happening, Vince? It's a fine day today to get together on our little podcast.
Yeah, that somehow has found an audience in even more countries in the last couple of weeks. So we've hit the charts in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, probably because of the time, first of all being at the conference last week, but also being anyways. Here we go, and let's start again, Mike, because that was really terrible. This is going to be just for the viewers of the show.
That's right.
This is going to get cut out of the podcast. You ready to go again, my friend?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to the Business Not As Usual podcast. I am Vince, and with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Good, Vince. What is going on with you?
It is a great day. And it's just a lot going on with things. I've been thinking lately about the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, we recently celebrated our 50th episode, which is monumentous.
It's tremendous.
And it got me thinking, like, do we still have the legs to keep going? Or do we need to adjust our heading? Mm-hmm. Does the topic still resonate? Are there things that we can still talk about in this space? And ultimately, I think there is. But it got me to thinking about how important it is to be able to pivot and sort of knowing when to pivot.
That is, yes, Vince. That's a good point. And pivoting for us is easy. It's just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on a large transformational program, how does one pivot? Do you pivot at all? How do you get that ship turned around, that large ship in the ocean? How does that happen? And so I think that's where you were going. And I'm interested to hear from you. Like, what do you think the factors are of when you have to pause and go, we have our plan, we've been working the plan. Is this still the right plan? Is it time for us to reevaluate and pivot? And then how do we do that? Because you've probably geared up to go in one direction. And that is a hard decision.
Especially, and you've alluded to this just now, right? The fact is, if we were going to pivot the show, it's easy. It's a conversation between the two of us. We are the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
The where we host our podcast, they don't care what we talk about. They just care that we regularly produce content. Like, they don't care.
Right.
We can talk about anything. So it really is a conversation between us versus something that requires, approval through governance or whatever. And so it is, the context here is really, really important. To me, to answer the question, it comes down to, it's what you have a plan. Yeah, you're working to the plan. Have factors changed that would necessitate a change in direction?
Mm-hmm.
Has something happened? You've had a change in leadership. You've had a change in social factors, economic factors, HR like you've had something that has changed, and that then needs a readjustment of your heading, because you may need to go in a different direction. So that's, that's the first thing. Has something changed that needs review? Because maybe you don't need to pivot, right? Like, is the problem that you're trying to solve still worth solving, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two things. Is it an outside force, for example, COVID,
Mhm.
or something else that happens. That I think would be an easier conversation. And then we say, we have to address certain things because of what's happened in the world. And that pivot now becomes, what should it be? I think the cell's a little bit easier.
Mhm.
I think where the cell becomes harder is, we had this plan, there's no external forces, but we're not actually meeting, it's becoming obvious we're not actually meeting the original goal or our metrics that we had, our KPIs or metrics that we had put against what we were doing. We're not hitting those in early results. So now that becomes, because that's all on you. And so that discussion, do you keep plugging away because it's still the right plan, or is that a time to pivot? And I think that is a hard conversation.
It's a hard conversation, but it really, I mean, what it really is an economic conversation. So it's how bought in are you, or your organization or your team, to the concept of sunk cost?
Mm-hmm.
Like rationally, if you're not achieving the objectives, I'm gonna drop some economics knowledge on you.
Oh no, it's economics. All right.
We're going econ, baby. If you're not achieving the objectives that you set out to achieve, or that were part of the business case or whatever, then rationally you should stop that work. The problem I find, though, is that project teams and organizations become romantic to
Mm-hmm.
the money that they've already spent, and they want to honor that money, and we can't honor it by pivoting. We can't like, if we stop this project, it means that we wasted $1 million.
Yes.
Cool. But if you continue it, it means that you are knowingly wasting additional resources. If you know that it's not getting you where you need to go, stop investing it. Now,
Yeah.
I'm saying this is like rationally.
You're looking at it dispassionately. So it's easy for us to sit here and go, yeah, you guys should stop. What's the matter with you?
I know that. And this is why but that's why I'm putting in that qualifier.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at it rationally, if you have a project that's not achieving its objectives, stop the project. However,
or
and I think
change
this is where
the
or whatever. However, please take it away.
I mean, passionately,
right.
If you don't look at it like that, there's a bunch of things. One, it becomes political. Did you sell the wrong business case?
Mm-hmm.
So now someone has to,
or worse,
to
did you lie to me? Did you lie to get what you wanted? Like, and you almost then have to defend yourself.
Even though with best of intentions you didn't, but now it's like, wait, you gave me the hard sell on this direction. Now what happened? So that's the first one. I think the second one is, you alluded to it, to the people. There is now a system in place for this direction, and now everybody's invested in that system. And now if you have to break that system, hold on, I was told to come on this program, and I bought into this direction, so we should keep going with that direction. And so, yes, it's the people being romantic that don't want to pivot, or if they have no choice, it will be a lot of discussion to pivot, and you don't get that velocity to get there. So straight up econ, going
easy choice.
Hit it, easy choice. But then the people get involved, not so easy choice.
Right.
And so then going back with a new version of the story to make that pivot now becomes the focus of the program.
Right.
Because everything else has to stop.
And it means that readjustment, that pivot, that redirection is going to be under even greater scrutiny.
Oh, I know.
Because
it's going to be brutal.
You were really wrong the first time. How do I know it basically comes down to a matter of trust.
How do I know you're right the second time?
How do I know? Exactly.
And so it takes a lot of courage, and you're really putting yourself on the line to try and make that change, because let's say you can get away with it once. Okay, got it. We bought into, if you're going to fail fast, blah, blah, blah. Now, how about the second time is not the right, or something else happens? So now, are you going to now go back and repivot?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, for people that are working on the project or the program and they're invested, they're either going to say, no, hold the line, or sure, we'll pivot, but then we'll pivot again. And it's not that easy for the person who needs to sell that pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's like a lot of factors where if you're going to put yourself on the line for that as the senior leader, your team is really going to have to give you a solid argument for that.
Mm-hmm. And see, so I mean, let's pull back the curtain a little bit, because again, in large organizations, as a part of large transformational programs, you're bang on. Versus if you are just listening to this on the podcast, go and watch the YouTube video of this stream where we had a failed opening. and I'm going to own that one. It was terrible, but it would have been worse to continue with that opening because we weren't getting off on the right foot. So we stopped, pivoted, started again. Mm-hmm. And yes, it was awkward, but it probably would, and it was unintentional, but it probably would have been more so if we had just continued. Like, we would have just stared at each other and like, so what do you, basically I created an opening that gave us nowhere to go. And, so anyways, that's mea culpa. But, I think it's the people factor is important, because you're right. Like, you've got to be in even greater sell mode. You've got to, lead with proof. And I think, you're right. It does sort of, you are sticking your neck out for a change where, sometimes the easy thing is just let it play out.
Stay the course.
Just stay the course. It's probably not the right thing to do. Right.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you let's hope the ship rights itself and then we're all good. We didn't make any waves. But that may be, like you said, throwing good money after bad when you see the results coming in of mm-hmm. the direction that you're going in.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked now about sort of how to identify and what some of the economic and social ramifications are of change. How do you know, beyond just we're not hitting metrics?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are some of the warning signs of it's time to change? And you talked earlier about, external factors like COVID versus mm-hmm. internal factors. What are some of those warning signs that you look for in this work to say, okay, you know what, we things seem fine, but they're not fine. I see the smoke on the horizon.
Right.
What are some of those warning signs?
Well, sometimes the work is right, but culturally there's something going on. And so mm-hmm. there's a pivot there. So the pivot is not so much like you got the work right, so you don't have to go resell that. Mm-hmm. But culturally in your transformational program, things are going wrong. And those things you start to see people wanting to get off, your stars wanting to get off the program. Mm-hmm. You can see the infighting and the loss of velocity, because mm-hmm. as you get less and less trust amongst the teams, your velocity goes down because they just question, because they're not trusting each other. Mm-hmm. They just question every motive or every move that another team does or another part of the program does. So your velocity mm-hmm. starts to wane.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, from a cultural perspective, is something that I look for and you have to address. So, and there's a pivot in there, and it may not have to go all the way up to reselling, the business case, but there is a shift that needs to happen. If you start to see those things, and the other one is people that are usually super engaged and really jump in and have a big voice, that they're no longer talking. These are warning signs that culturally something's going on in the program.
Mm-hmm. And that last one is one that sort of really hits for me, because we've all seen that adage of, the thing that should scare you the most is when your most passionate people become quiet.
Right.
I know I've seen this in myself, even where I am the, if you go back to the episodes that we did on the roles you need, I am the rebel. I'm the devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not talking, that is a warning sign to me that something's wrong.
Right.
And I hope that the people that are responsible for watching are also noticing that. I don't know, but I sort of see it the same way as you. I look at it from a different perspective, being sort of at a lower level within that work. Seeing where people are they're no longer bringing that thunder to the work.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be elsewhere. They're not bringing their A game. Yeah. They don't want to be involved. They, skip out on meetings, just because they don't want to be in a particular place. These are all critical warning signs.
And now that we're mostly distributed because of the world we're in, you could, if you're all in a room, you could see the person disengage.
Yeah.
Right. Like Vince is doing right now.
Yeah.
But if the same person who, was there and having conversations and being part of it, now always enters with their video microphone off, never, like, that is the equivalent of what Vince just showed. If you're watching the live feed, like slunch back, not caring, looking elsewhere. And those are things, that's disengagement. And at the pace of which programs go, most people don't see it until it's too late. But as you said, Vince, like, the people that should be watching need to be looking out for those signs, because those are signs that are eventually going to have huge ramifications on the program.
And I've in my experience, those are the things that usually come from above. And so, you maybe have a change in leadership who has taken the program in a new direction, at least practically. So maybe they're still, aligned to, we're gonna transform our business. We're gonna transform the way we do things. Maybe it'll like, or they are not, or they've shifted the vision, or they've shifted the North Star, without, just almost because. So, and in many cases, it's to put their stamp on the work. But I find that those are often causes for the people that want to get off the ship, because they've seen that pattern before. They know what's coming, and they, don't want to be anywhere near it when it does become a problem. Because, if a new leader comes in, it's normal for them to take a bit of a review period, but you don't want them re-pivoting or changing direction superfluously, because how do you know, like, unless, again, something has fundamentally changed that necessitates that, was the original vision so far off that you need that? Or is it just, you had an old leader leave, a new leader's coming in, and they're just continuing the course, as it were?
If we go back to that, you would hope that the vision is systemic, right?
You would hope,
which would make it, which at the first part of this conversation, which makes it so hard to pivot. So, and because, players are
That's
going
fair.
in and out. Players are going in and out, right? Like you're not going to have the pace and maybe like the stages of a transformation. The people you need right at the beginning are not the people you need at the middle and not the people you need at the end. And having a person that's there for the entire time, if they do it, they're heroes. But to be on a program for 5 years is like, usually you tag these people in and out. And so that vision should be enterprise wide so that, new people, like, because you all have to go, like every time people are tagging in and out, you can't be changing the vision. It's you change it if external factors change, or if it's no longer, you had a hypothesis, let's say with the business case, and now it's not panning out, or it wasn't the right way and you have to pivot. That's hard, but it should be an entrenched vision, because if it's so easy to change, then pivoting's easy. But then you'll be on a 30-year program, because you'll be changing forever, right? So that vision needs to be like part of the DNA, which is why we started with it. It's so hard to now unlock yourself from that, and that's why it takes so much courage. That if it's not the right thing, to go and do it. But that's and it's easy for us to sit here and go, they should just go do it, right? But if it's part of the DNA of the company now, that is a hard conversation for that leader to have. I think these other things are like the pivoting in culture. You really got to get to change people, and you really have to re-establish what made the program exciting at the start, or reignite that vision. But that's still a pivot that you have to do. It takes away from the grind. It takes away from some of the work, because you need to go do these activities that you weren't doing previously.
It's a pivot, but it's a pivot back. It's to course correct.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's. I mean, I almost see that as different, and maybe it's not, because you're right. The pivot is to go back to the original path. As you were, and by the way, I agree with you, and you probably heard me say, "Oh yeah, good point." Which is why I like these shows, because it is really a conversation where we're just exchanging ideas. But I liked, it made me think of something, which is, something that I've used historically, and not so much anymore, because it tends to create, again, in the cultural context, can create more agitation than is worth. but it's really about, starting your sessions, your workshops, your meetings with whatever, with a question. Is this still the problem that we need to solve? Is this still important to us? Because if it isn't, then we need to pursue what is important to us.
Right.
And if it is still important to us, are we still doing the right things? And these, I think, it's a simple question, but I think it brings all of this together, because it forces you to have those really, really difficult conversations from a rational perspective, from an irrational perspective, on, are we doing the right things based on the original vision of this work, or do we need to correct? But it's an invitation to a conversation. Are we still doing the right work? Right? Because I think you said earlier, you might be doing the work right, but are you doing the right work?
Right. Well, I think it's good to have those micro check-ins, so you can, if you're checking in, then it doesn't become like, if you have those check-ins and every session is no, we're not solving the right problem, you would have heard it a bunch of times, as opposed to not checking in and all of a sudden
the sky is falling.
how did this happen? Never
Yeah.
heard about it. What this caught us by surprise. It just snuck up on us, and it snuck up, and then all of a sudden it becomes something that's dire because you haven't asked, you haven't continuously checked back in with the original vision. Again, that's another factor that if you keep asking these questions and the answer is not what should be answered, then that is a factor for a larger discussion on what is the path of your business / digital transformation.
Well, and I think the comment that you made sort of from the front was, is it an external factor or is it something internal? I think, I think everybody was fairly blindsided by, the COVID pandemic, which was very much an external factor. I mean, even if you were aware of it, I don't know many people that would have predicted the size and scale of the impact.
No.
Like thinking back, we're now at about a year since the world changed.
Yeah,
and I think at the time it was like, go home, work from home for the next 3 weeks,
2 weeks,
and then 3 weeks, and then you'll be back, right? So I don't think anybody could have predicted that. I think that's different. Those are a lot harder to predict. They're a lot harder to account for, and yes, they do require major course correction. Not so much a pivot, but just a course correction, because you now need to work in a different way. I think that's very different than internal factors, because within the box, you should know what's going on. You shouldn't, like, nothing internal should blindside you. And I'll be bold and say that even includes, key leaders leaving or coming in. You should be aware, again, depending on where you are in the transformation, you should be aware though of what's going on and how that impacts the work that you're doing. But anything that changes internally should not derail you, at least not in any significant way.
Yeah, and I think that was my point. If the big disruption we had around COVID, that pivot, I think, is that one's easy. Hey, we were doing this, got blindsided. It's supposed to be now we got to change. And everyone's like all your stakeholders, got it, understood. That's not like that's not putting your neck out.
There was no sell. There was no sell.
There's no sell. Everybody's super yes, doing the right thing. The other thing that you're talking about, if it was get rid of COVID, if it was an internal thing that snuck up on you, there's no forgiving there. Your stakeholders are not going to forgive you. Your senior leaders are not going to forgive you. Like, that is the role of the people in the program, that these things shouldn't. That's what I'm saying. That is going to be the hard sell, because especially if it goes to dire circumstance. Like, we need to do this now because all of a sudden it caught up on us, and that's the hard one. Those are the factors that are hard to have to explain when you need to pivot.
Right, because why didn't you know?
Yeah, and not that I want to. I mean, it's well known, so we can talk about it. But up here in Canada, there was this Phoenix project. It was in the news. Public servants didn't get paid for 6 months at a time. It was it was an absolute disaster. It was like a switchover of a payroll system, but it went horribly wrong. And when they finally went back in, what the team did was they didn't go look at the streams or the projects under the big umbrella that were green. That were red. No, my friends. They started with the projects that were green. Oh, you're green? Yet we have a disaster? Awesome. Come and tell me how you're green. And so again, everyone's showing green, yet this disaster happened, or this snuck up on you, or you missed a deadline, or the thing that you put out didn't go well, the deployment wasn't well, but you were green. You weren't even amber, you were green. So they actually started with all the green projects and said, okay, show me how you're green.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are, remember, those are again factors. Like smart people will come in and start picking away at these things, at the factors that you should be seeing,
Right.
that you're either ignoring or you're not asking. So, they could be green because they weren't asking that question that you had asked, Vince.
Right. Right.
Not,
And I think you just touched on maybe the final big thing that we need to talk about as part of this episode, which is if you need to course correct and you are delivering in a big bang,
yes,
and you're not asking those questions, much like Phoenix,
mm-hmm.
you don't know until all hell breaks loose.
Because
you have no clue.
You dropped it all on the same day.
Right.
And everything was roses. And then, it happens.
Yeah.
And now it's like, and listen, we're not telling state secrets. It was all in the paper. Like, it was all in the media. So
Mm-hmm.
for it to get out to that's how bad it was. People's.
Mike, I was at a conference in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. I was at a conference that was it was the Lean in Government conference.
Mm-hmm.
And every conversation that I had
about that
was, are you on Phoenix? Every single one. Oh, is CRA, you guys on Phoenix? Yeah, we're on Phoenix. Ministry of or Department of Labor, are you on Phoenix? No, we're not on Phoenix. Oh, lucky you. Like, that was a major
yes.
a major topic of conversation 2 years after the project was delivered.
Right.
So but again, if you're delivering, so if there are micro projects within the program, within that portfolio, are they delivering iteratively? Or is everyone just delivering their thing at the end, and then whoops, we were supposed to be building a car and somehow ended up with a submarine on wheels. Like, I don't know how that happened. So, but you don't know until it's too late. So, so if you are delivering in an iterative way, it's a lot easier to identify the need for course correction or to pivot.
Yes.
Because you're going to get real-time results, real world results.
Yeah, I was about to say that. You're going to get real-time results from your customers, your internal customers, by putting out things in iterations. You're going to see if those factors are being met. And if you need to, you can just keep going with a little tweak, or just keep going altogether, or you really need to do the work to course correct and pivot.
Right.
But if you just drop it all in the same, there's no pivoting, friends. There's just disaster.
The pivot is redoing the project.
Yes, that's the pivot. You go right back into another transformational project.
And I mean, sometimes you don't have to. We're not saying you need to.
No.
Sometimes, if you can answer that question, are we still doing the right things? Are we still solving the right problem? There's no need to pivot. You're good.
Right.
Maybe you need to tweak a little, whatever. You don't need to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not saying you should, but just be aware of some of those causes, some of the ramifications, people leaving, people getting quiet. You want to make sure that if you've got to pivot, you do it before you're getting into delivery, because the cost to correct at that point is exponentially greater.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good place to leave this one, Michael. Episode 52 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. What do you think, good listeners? What do you think? What are some of the things that you look for? What are some of the warning signs that you look for in your transformational work that are those signs of there's a need that something needs to change, something we need to pivot, we need to do something, or it's time to get off the ship? What are the things that you do? Let us know on the socials, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or you can hit us up at vincentmirabelli.com or michaelmartino.ca. For Vince and Mike, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast, episode 52. We will catch you in the next one.
See ya.